Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. In her new book, Mary Harrington argues that feminism, at least in its modern context, is regressive, not progressive. Mary Harrington is a contributing editor at UnHerd, and her book, Feminism Against Progress. Mary Harrington joins us now. Mary, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So, explain why feminism is associated with progress, at least through the first couple of waves of feminism. But in the 21st century, it is regressive in nature as it pertains to women's advancements.
Well, actually, what I've argued in the book is not. My argument is in favor of feminism against progress. I think progress is in fact progressive in the sense that well, at least in the terms it's come to. In terms of what it's come to mean, I think progress is anti-women, and we should not be looking to progress to deliver on the interests of women anymore, because progress has come to mean really the never-ending onward march of technology, something which is taking us further and further into the technologization of bodies, for example, through big fertility, through third-party gestational services, through gestational surrogacy, through commodifying women's bodies, and really all of our bodies through things like phenomena like legitimizing the sex industry. And all of these things are now framed in feminist terms. And my argument is that we need to take feminism back from the people who are arguing in favor of progress, and reclaim feminism as the movement for women who defend being female as such, rather than just being an assemblage of meat Lego parts that we can mess around with as we see fit.
Well, right. I mean, I'm talking about progress in its traditional definition, and in this context, progress meaning equality, progress meaning individual liberty, which was associated at least with first wave and to some extent second wave feminism. But as you say, today it's been redefined, as so many terms have been, by the left. So when you talk about this, there was, it seems to me, a break from the suffrage movement to the second wave feminists of the 60s to the third wave feminists of the 90s that were post-structuralist, post-modernist in orientation, leading us to today and these iterations that you describe. Is that fair?
Well, broadly speaking, yes. I mean, I would say the big hinge movement. The big hinge moment was the 1960s. So everything which has followed since falls pretty logically out of what happened in the 1960s. And what actually happened there was it was a technology transition that transformed feminism in the 1960s. And that transition, I've argued in the book, Feminism Against Progress, ended feminism. It wasn't the beginning of feminism, as people now often think. It was its end. Because what it did, at that point, we left the industrial era, which was the era that the women's movement had responded to in terms of really responding to changes in the way family life worked with the industrial era, particularly as work left the home. That in fact is the origin of the women's movement, is responding to those changes. But with the 1960s, what happened was that we left the industrial era for what I've called the cyborg era, which is to say the age of biotech and the age of digital tech. And we've been living in that era increasingly obviously ever since. And it's really with the arrival of the mass internet that has been radically accelerated. But the key transition point was the arrival of birth control pill, and then inevitably, as a consequence of the birth control pill, the arrival of legal abortion. And that was the point where one side of feminism defeated the other. So the feminism of care was defeated by the feminism of freedom, which is to say the freedom to be anything I want to be, and a vision of people as really sort of post-sex and unsexed.
And so, I mean,
the version of feminism which conservatives like to hate on, and this is the one we've been living with ever since.
Right, and so I mean, so it seems to me it's like at its foundation, we need to address this canard that a lot of people subscribe to, even just sort of instinctively, that the latest point in time is the most advanced point in time for humanity.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'm not a believer in progress in that sense. I don't think it's a thing. I mean, it's certainly true that cultures evolve as time goes on. We can't dispute that life now is very different to what it was like in Roman times. But is the human species in total any happier or more virtuous than we were during Roman times? I don't know. I don't even know how you argue that. It's not possible. It's not possible to do that.
Can you explain?
So I don't really believe in progress in that sense.
Okay. Can you explain the connection between abortion and trans rights?
you can draw a straight line between abortion and transgender rights. I mean, at the end of the day, well, it starts really with the pill, but the pill and the abortion can't really be unlinked, and I'll explain why. It was believed by early campaigners for the birth control pill that the result would be fewer unplanned pregnancies. That wasn't what happened. In fact, it produced more unplanned pregnancies because the availability, the fact that sex was now de-risked or mostly de-risked, meant that so many more people were having sex that even though the probability of falling pregnant was lower, the absolute number of casual encounters was so much higher that it ended up producing more unplanned pregnancies, not fewer. And as a result, it pushed people more further, inexorably towards needing to legalize abortion, really, as the backstop for this new contraceptive technology. So contraception and abortion go together. One just follows logically from the other. And if you remodel sexual mores in line with reliable contraception, it's very difficult to avoid then having to also legalize abortion. So those two things go together. And up to that point, the women's movement had been characterized by a back and forth between those women who wanted to defend women as female, in the sense that we may work, we think we're capable of excellence and dignity, etc., and so on. Women are human, but we're different from men in the sense that our bodies work a little bit differently. There are distinctive features of women's role as mothers and as capable of pregnancy and breastfeeding, obligations and preferences and so on that go with that. And there were a great many women who wanted to defend that on its own terms. But then there were also women who said, well, no, this isn't enough. In fact, what will be best for women and what will serve women's interests best is to enter the market on the same terms as men, and really to be treated in every possible sense as no different to men. And I suppose sort of in the 20th century, you might see this as the argument between Phyllis Schlafly's campaign and that of those women who are campaigning for the Equal Rights Amendment. Phyllis Schlafly will say, no, it's absolutely not in women's interests to be treated as the same as men with an Equal Rights Amendment in all contexts, because there are some points where actually women need to be protected as women. And then there were a great many women who said, no, this is a disaster. So broadly speaking, you could call these the feminism of care, which is to say of our relationship to one another, and women as mothers, women as wives, women as family members, and women in our relationships to one another, women as part of the fabric of human society and family life. And then the feminism of freedom that said, no, actually, we want to be free, we want to be emancipated in every possible way. And what happened when abortion was legalized is, well, wherever you stand on the very difficult and emotive issues around abortion, it's hard to think of a stronger statement in favor of freedom over care. If you say my freedom is so important that I will defend it even at the cost of a potential life that's dependent on my body, then you're making about the strongest statement you can in favor of freedom. And so, and that was the point really where women's personhood and feminism in total became inseparable from that idea of absolute freedom, even at the expense of a potential human life. And it also associated feminism associated feminism forever with the medical technologies that underwrite that. And really, if you argue that it's feminist and it's good and it's right and it's progressive for women to be able to mess with their endocrine systems and undergo surgeries in the name of freedom and self-actualization, then why would we stop at women? It just doesn't make sense. So from the point of view of this kind, the feminism of freedom, it's perfectly logically coherent to defend transgender identification and transgender surgeries as pretty much the same form of self-actualization. If I'm allowed to modify my own endocrine systems using the birth control pill in pursuit of freedom, why should somebody else not modify their endocrine system in pursuit of an inner felt sense that they're a woman, even if in fact they have a male body? I mean, it's a difference of degree rather than kind. So you can draw a straight line from the birth control pill and abortion to transgender ideology, and it feels as though it's come out of nowhere, but that's really only because it's been accelerated by the arrival of the internet and the subcultures that. But this has been brewing since the 1960s.
Are you surprised by the surprise from some second wave feminists? I'm talking about the Gloria Steinem era, and how they have been marginalized and categorized. You know, there's a term now called TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, and it refers to mainly second wave feminists who didn't see this coming, do not believe that Bruce Jenner can just wake up one day and become a woman, and he is a woman just like Gloria Steinem or Bella Abzug was a woman. But they were caught flat-footed. They didn't understand, it seems to me, the implications of what they were advocating back in the 60s.
Indeed. I mean, I should remind you that I'm speaking to you from the United Kingdom, which is also known as TERF Island. We are there is a very well-developed movement of, I suppose we would call ourselves gender-critical feminists. But there's a great deal of disagreement within that movement, particularly among those feminists who question some of these sort of basic, some of the second wave logic that got us into this position, and between those feminists who would like to hold on to the second wave logic but just stop at the point where we start messing around, where we start saying that a man can be a woman. So there are great feminists who quite like to hold on to birth control and abortion. Really, I'd say the majority of them, but who just like to stop before we get any further down the slippery slope. And I think this is one of the great. It's an area of tension, certainly amongst the coalition of people who are resisting the rollout of transgender ideology. It's definitely a source of some disagreement among feminists. Yes, absolutely. I think there are among my friends, there are some areas where definitely we tread carefully.
She is Mary Harrington, contributing editor at UnHerd.com and author of the just-released book, Feminism Against Progress. Mary Harrington, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Dennis Prager here. Sue and I mean it when we say dogs are part of our family, and there's nothing like their loyal companionship. So we provide them with Rough Greens, RUFF, because we want them to feel healthy and be with us as long as possible. I know Charlie Kirk feels the same way.
The Pragers and I couldn't agree more. I rely on my trusted furry friend, Mr. Briggs, who's an